The battlefield was silent now, the war cries of the Exelthar warriors fading into nothingness. The great alpha of the Dominion, the undefeated warlord Vakor, lay dead, his massive body broken under the weight of his final battle. His warriors stood still, their eyes filled with reverence, but there was no mourning among them. The Exelthar did not weep for the fallen. They did not honor the weak. And to them, Vakor's cub, Varuun, was weak. The youngling was too small, too untested. A mere child, barely standing at his father's side when the battle had begun. Now, with his father gone, the Dominion had no use for an heir too young to fight. In their eyes, Varuun was nothing but a liability. A burden. A mistake. Without a second thought, they left him behind. The warships rose into the dark sky, disappearing into the void as the Dominion moved on, seeking new battles, new conquests. And there, on the desolate moon where his father had died, Varuun was left to perish. His body trembled with exhaustion, his small claws digging into the frozen ground. His wounds burned, his stomach ached with hunger, and the crushing silence of abandonment wrapped around him like a suffocating shadow. He roared a weak, pitiful cry, but there was no one to answer. The stars above remained cold, indifferent to his suffering. The great Dominion had no need for a cub who could not fight. The laws of the Exelthar were absolute. The weak must die so that the strong may thrive. Days passed. The moon was barren, its icy winds howling through the jagged rocks. Varuun could barely move now, his strength fading. His once bright eyes, filled with the fire of his lineage, were growing dull. His body was failing. He would die here, alone and forgotten, like so many before him. But then, when all hope had left him, the humans arrived. The ship descended from the sky, sleek and silver against the blackness of space. It was not a warship, not a vessel of destruction, but a human research craft, the UHS Valkyrie. Captain Jonas Cade stood at the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the desolate terrain below. The distress signal had been faint, barely noticeable among the usual cosmic noise. They had almost ignored it. Almost. But something in Cade's gut told him to investigate. And when the scanners detected a single dying life form, he made a decision that would change the course of history. The humans found Varuun barely clinging to life, his once mighty form reduced to a shivering husk. His breaths were weak, his body broken. Any other species would have left him there just as his own kind had. But humans were different. They saw life where others saw failure. They saw potential where others saw weakness. Against all logic, against every warning in the galactic records about the monstrous strength of a fully grown Exelthar, Captain Cade gave the order to save him. A run was taken aboard the Valkyrie, his massive frame placed inside the medical bay. The human doctors worked tirelessly, sealing his wounds, stabilizing his failing body. They were not afraid of him, even when he stirred, even when his clawed hands twitched with primal instinct. They spoke softly, their voices filled with something foreign to him: kindness. He did not understand it. No Exelthar had ever treated him like this. No one had ever touched him with care, spoken to him without the cold expectation of dominance. His mind, conditioned by the brutal laws of his people, whispered that he should resist, that he should snarl and strike, that mercy was a weakness. But he was too tired, too broken. So, he let the humans help him. Days turned into weeks, and for the first time in his life, Varuun knew warmth. The humans did not abandon him. They brought him food, even when he did not ask for it. They checked his wounds, even when he no longer needed them to. And when he woke from nightmares, visions of his father's death, of the cold emptiness of space, they were there, their voices calm, their hands steady. He did not understand why they did this, why they cared. As his strength returned, so did the fire in his blood. His body grew stronger, his movements sharper. The humans taught him not just how to survive, but how to think, how to fight, how to be more than what the Exelthar had allowed him to be. They showed him that power was not just about brute strength. It was about strategy. It was about loyalty. And most of all, it was about standing with those who would never leave you behind. Then, one day, the alarms blared. The XL had returned. A fleet of warships hovered in the abyss, beyond the Valkyrie, their weapons locked, their demands clear: surrender the cub or be destroyed. The humans looked at Varun, waiting for his answer. His kind had abandoned him, cast him aside without hesitation. But now they wanted him back, not as a son, not as an heir, but as a tool, a pawn to be controlled. Varun rose to his full height, his claws flexing, his golden eyes burning with newfound clarity. The XL had left him to die. The humans had given him life, and in that moment he made his choice. He would not go back. He was not one of them anymore. He was something new. And when the first warship opened fire, he stood with the humans. Because they had done what no one else in the galaxy had, they had saved the forsaken heir. Varun had never known warmth until he was taken in by the humans. His own kind had abandoned him, left him to die on a forgotten moon, deeming him too weak to be of any use. But the humans were different. They saw something in him that no ever had: potential. They did not fear him, even though they knew what his species was capable of. They did not cage him, even though he was bigger, stronger, and faster than any of them. Instead, they healed him, fed him, and taught him. At first, he did not understand why. His mind had been shaped by the brutal laws of the Dominion, where only the strongest survived and the weak were cast aside. Mercy was unheard of, compassion was a weakness, and trust was a dangerous gamble. But the humans did not operate under those rules. They did not abandon the wounded. They did not leave the weak to perish. And most of all, they did not give up on him. The crew of the UHS Valkyrie became his new family, even if he did not yet realize it. They spoke to him like he was one of them, not an outsider, not an animal. Captain Jonas Cade treated him as more than just a rescued creature. He treated him like a soldier in the making. He saw past Varun's bloodline, past the monstrous strength of his kind, and instead saw what he could become. At first, Varun resisted. His instincts told him to rely on brute force, to lash out when challenged. But time and time again, he watched the humans fight not with strength alone, but with intelligence, strategy, and precision. They did not fight for dominance. They fought for survival, for each other. He studied them, learning from their ways, understanding that there was more to war than simple violence. He trained alongside them, his raw power tempered by discipline. His body, already powerful, became a weapon not of reckless fury, but of controlled destruction. The humans did not just train him, they reshaped him. They sharpened his mind, taught him about technology, about tactics, about the value of thinking before striking. They placed him in simulations, forcing him to face situations where brute force alone would fail. They taught him patience, showed him the importance of deception and misdirection. And for the first time, Varun began to see beyond the narrow vision of his kind. He saw that true power did not come from physical strength alone, but from knowing when to strike and when to wait, when to push forward and when to retreat. He learned how to wield weapons designed for humans, his massive hands adjusting to smaller triggers, his instincts fine-tuned for precision. His speed, his strength, his sheer presence, combined with human tactics, made him into something even the XL had never seen before. As months passed, whispers spread across the ship. Varun was no longer just a rescued creature. He was a warrior. He was becoming something new, something terrifying. Even among the hardened human soldiers, there was an unspoken understanding: if the XL ever came for him, they would not be facing the same helpless cub they had abandoned. The humans had raised him not as a pet, not as an experiment, but as one of their own. And that made him far more dangerous than anything the Dominion had ever faced. Then, the day came. The alarms blared across the ship. A XL scout vessel had been detected, its war insignia unmistakable. They had come looking for their lost heir. The crew prepared for battle, knowing the Dominion would not negotiate. They would either take Varun by force or kill everyone who stood in their way. But before Captain Cade could give the order to retreat, Varun stepped forward. His golden eyes burned with something new, a sense of purpose, of belonging, of fury held in perfect control. He was no longer the cub who had been left to die. He was no longer a lost, broken creature waiting to be claimed. He had chosen his side. He had chosen his people. And when the Exelthar warship opened fire, Varun did not run. He led the charge. Varun stood in the training chamber of the UHS Valkyrie, his massive form casting a shadow over the human soldiers watching him. He was no longer the weak, abandoned cub left to die by his own kind. He was something else now, something more. His golden eyes burned with determination as he faced his opponents, his muscles tensed, his claws restrained. The humans had spent years training him, not just in brute strength, but in discipline, tactics, and precision. He had learned the art of war not as a mindless beast, but as a soldier, molded in the ways of humanity. And now, as he stood in the combat ring, preparing to spar against 5 of the most elite human warriors, he knew this was no longer a test of skill. It was a declaration. The fight began in an instant. The humans moved fast, surrounding him, using their agility against his size. In the past, he would have lashed out wildly, relying on raw power. But he was not just the Exelthar anymore, he was something new, something that had never existed before. He anticipated their attacks, weaving through their strikes with calculated precision. A human soldier lunged at him from the left. Varun sidestepped, deflecting the blow with a controlled movement. Another aimed a strike at his back, but he spun, his claws stopping inches from the soldier's throat. He could have killed them all within seconds, but that was not his way anymore. The Exelthar fought like beasts. The humans fought like warriors. And Varun was both. The sparring session ended with him standing victorious, the soldiers panting on the floor. They had given it their all, but Varun had become something unstoppable. As he helped his fallen comrades to their feet, he saw respect in their eyes. They no longer looked at him as a rescued alien, nor as a monster that had been tamed. They looked at him as one of them. Captain Jonas Cade watched from the observation deck, a grim expression on his face. He had always believed in Varun, but now he saw what they had created. A hybrid warrior. A fusion of human intellect and Exelthar strength. A living weapon that could change the course of history. But history was not kind to outliers. And soon, the galaxy would come for him. The warning came 2 days later. The Exelthar Dominion had learned of Varun's survival. They had dismissed him as weak before, but now he was an anomaly, a threat to their entire way of life. A warrior who fought with human tactics, who understood strategy and unity, was a danger unlike anything they had ever faced. And so, they came not to reclaim him, but to erase him. A fleet of Exelthar warships descended upon the human colony of Ravon 9, where the Valkyrie was stationed. The attack was merciless, their forces overwhelming. The Exelthar had always been brutal, but this time, their fury was focused. They sent a message across the battlefield, "Give us the traitor, and we will spare the rest." Varun stood at the bridge of the Valkyrie, his claws tightening into fists. He had spent his whole life being told what he was. A weakling. A failure. A mistake. And now, when he had finally found a place where he belonged, his past had come to take it away. The humans prepared for battle, ready to fight and die beside him. But Varun knew the truth. This was his fight. His past, his people, had come to end him. And he would answer them not as a forsaken cub, not as a runaway, but as a warrior of 2 worlds. He stepped onto the battlefield alone, his massive frame towering over the Exelthar warriors who had once abandoned him. They sneered, expecting a mindless beast. But when he moved, he struck with the speed of a human soldier and the power of Exelthar warlord. He was no longer just a product of his species. He was something beyond them. He was a hybrid warrior, a fusion of the deadliest traits in the galaxy, wielded with precision and control. The battle did not last long. The Exelthar, for all their strength, had never fought one of their own who understood strategy, deception, and restraint. When it ended, Varun stood among the fallen, his golden eyes locked onto the remaining warlord who had led the attack. The defeated commander stared at him in disbelief. "What are you?" he growled. Varun took a step forward, the human soldiers gathering behind him. He had spent years searching for an answer to that question. He had been abandoned as a cub. He had been raised by humans. He had learned from them, fought beside them, become one of them. And now, standing above the broken remnants of the past, he finally knew the answer. I am more. The Exalthar warlord stepped back, fear flickering in his monstrous eyes. The Dominion had sought to erase him, but instead they had created something beyond their understanding. And as Varroan turned back to the humans who had made him who he was, he knew this was just the beginning. The hybrid warrior had risen, and the galaxy would never be the same. The battlefield was silent, save for the crackling flames and the distant echoes of dying screams. The Exalthar Dominion had always believed themselves to be the ultimate predators, the undisputed rulers of war. Their species had dominated the stars for centuries, crushing any who dared challenge their strength. But tonight, they faced something far worse than any enemy they had ever encountered. Tonight, they faced the unknown dot, eye in the heart of the wreckage. Surrounded by the lifeless bodies of elite Exalthar warriors, stood the last one alive. His breathing was ragged, his massive frame covered in wounds, yet his golden eyes burned with something primal, something terrifying. His name was Varroan, and he was no longer just another soldier. He was the last mistake the Exalthar would ever make. The Dominion had abandoned him years ago, left him to die because he was deemed too weak, unworthy of their legacy. But the humans had taken him in, raised him, trained him. They had not feared his strength, they had refined it. They had not controlled his instincts, they had sharpened them. And in doing so, they had created something the galaxy had never seen before. Varroan moved through the battlefield like a phantom, his massive form a blur of speed and precision. He was faster than his kind, smarter, more disciplined. The Exalthar fought with brute force, relying on overwhelming strength. Varroan fought with intelligence, with patience, with tactics that no other Exalthar could understand. Every strike he delivered was calculated. Every kill was executed with precision. He was not just a warrior. He was a predator among predators. The last Exalthar standing before him trembled, gripping his plasma blade with shaking hands. He had fought countless battles, had torn through entire armies, but never had he felt this kind of fear. This was not a battle anymore. This was a hunt. And he was the prey. You are not one of us, traitor. The warrior spat, trying to mask his fear with rage. You fight like them. You think like them? You are no Exalthar. Varroan stepped forward, the glow of fire reflecting in his eyes. No, he said, his voice calm, steady. I am something worse. And then he struck. The battle lasted mere seconds. The Exalthar warrior barely had time to react before Varroan's claws tore through his armor. His body hit the ground with a heavy thud, lifeless before he even understood what had happened. The flames burned brighter around him, casting long shadows as Varroan turned his gaze to the sky. The Exalthar had come here expecting to reclaim a lost cub, a failure of their species. Instead, they had found their replacement. The humans had given him everything the Dominion had denied him: purpose, knowledge, strength beyond raw brutality. He had surpassed his kind, had evolved beyond them. He was no longer just another warrior in the endless cycle of war. He was the new apex predator, and the galaxy would learn to fear him.